And we'll continue our discussion, but we wanted to show you a little something that the governor also had to say on Friday. He reiterated, as we just discussed, his focus on downsizing state government.
I want to be very clear that, as I said the day I signed the budget, this was passed by the legislature. This is not a day to celebrate. Yes, it's a significant accomplishment, and yes, it will save taxpayers an enormous amount of money over time. But any time you ask sacrifices of people, you need to be mindful of the impact on their lives, and I am. In return for all the sacrifices they have made, state employees have received job security. But let me be very clear about this. The work of revitalizing state government has just begun, and it will continue. Over the next few years, I intend to reduce the number of state employees. But rather than doing that by layoffs, we will do it by attrition and by eliminating managerial positions. And we will make the state workforce more efficient by making smart investments in technology. We will give our state employees the tools they need to be successful. Now, this agreement must be ratified by the individual employee bargaining units. As a show of good faith, I've directed Ben Barnes, the OPM secretary, to immediately suspend the issuance of layoff notices and to rescind the ones that have been issued so far. I urge my fellow state employees to approve this agreement in a timely fashion. Once ratified by the rank-and-file workers, we stand ready to work with the leadership of the General Assembly to secure final approval. When this happens, come July 1, the state will have in place a budget that is balanced, with no gimmicks, and one that provides something that the state hasn't had in many years, fiscal stability.
Joining us now are two reporters from the Connecticut Mirror, Mark Pazniokas and Keith Phaneuf, who are with us on this program every Monday. And, of course, you can read their stories on ctmirror.org. Mark, good morning. Keith, good morning. Mark, how does the governor look coming out of this? Well,
right now he looks great. We'll have to see what exactly is in this settlement. I mean, right now we're taking a lot on faith. The $1.6 billion savings over the next 2 years, as well as the long-term savings due to retirement changes that we're still pretty fuzzy about. But short-term politically, absolutely. I mean, he looks pretty good right now to, bring this thing home with peace.
Keith, does this mean that the Plan B budget we've been hearing so much about is totally dead, or are they going to have to go back to the well now because there's $1.6 billion in concessions, not $2 billion in concessions?
The Plan B budget was dead when his proposal, when the settlement was announced. It was dead before the settlement was announced. It was dead when it was released. And if possible, it was dead before the governor thought of it. It was totally a political move. I don't think anyone seriously thought that you were going to see cuts to that tier. I think you will see, for political reasons, much more for budgetary ones, one or two cuts that have some traction in the media and the public. They may not have big dollars, but they appear to have some weight. They'll garner a few headlines. I think he'll resolve he'll fill in most of the holes that the labor deal doesn't patch up with a built-in surplus he's already crafted into this budget, sort of a fiscal cushion, a safety net.
What you say in your story that's online today, he's going to have a hard time holding on to.
He's going to certainly going to feel some pressure from his own party to, over the next 2 years, if his target was $2 billion in concessions and he got 1.6, and it's a true 1.6, simple math, he's got $400 million to spackle in. I think the Democrats are going to say, let's just take all $400 million out of the cushion. I think fiscally, he's not going to have a huge problem with taking some. I don't think he's going to want to let them take all. But the bottom line is, you don't really panic about, a few bills when you've got more than enough money in the bank to cover it. And that's what he's facing right now.
Mark, even though the details really haven't been released yet, from what people had been talking about on Friday, the Republicans already said, this is a giveaway to the unions. This is such a long-term deal. It isn't any better than what John Rowland negotiated. What's your reaction to what they've been saying?
Well, again, I'm going to react with more caution than they did, because I'd like to actually see the damn thing. My sense is there's some long-term savings. If he truly did, if he truly was able to accomplish changing the retirement age, and there's some question over that, then that would be a significant accomplishment that previous governors would have loved to have done. Now the irony will be, Malloy won't be the beneficiary of it. That'll be 2 or 3 governors down the line probably. The short-term numbers, as Keith suggested, will probably turn out to be a little squishy. He's going to use some of that surplus money. What exactly went into that 1.6 billion savings? We really don't know. We know there's a wage freeze. That's definite. But we don't really know how you get 700 million in the first year and 900 million in the second, as of now.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is that Bill Sivas, who of course was a former budget secretary, released some information, and I saw him give this presentation this spring to the AFL, saying that there are a lot of myths about state employees. One of the things that he points out is that state employees are not paid a lot more than private sector employees. According to his figures, if you calculate their age and their education level and their experience level, they're actually at the same rate of pay.
Yeah, he's basing that on a study that came out of UMass last fall, and I remember the study when it came out. And the problem with these things is trying to precisely do those comparisons. The study concluded that on average, state employees are made more, but it's when you apply all these sophisticated control groups, and you go education level to education level. The problem is the authors of the study admit that they don't have a good way to factor in benefits. The other issues are, how do you compare lawyers in private practice to lawyers at the state? Is that really apples to apples? Or Keith and I were talking before we came on. CEO salaries versus a state commissioner. Is that a fair comparison? So I would just, again, caution in all these studies. This is very, very complicated stuff to do these apples-to-apples comparisons, and I've never seen one, whether it came from the political left or the right, that was totally convincing.
Keith, you and I spoke before the session really got underway, or was about to get underway, about what kinds of an answer the legislature was actually looking for. In fact, some of the leaders would be looking for in developing this budget. And I think at the time you calculated that they would be talking about a third in concessions, a third in taxes, and a third in borrowing. It doesn't look like it's going to work out that way. It looks as though there's the political will to go ahead without that borrowing.
If as Mark said, the concessions are real, here's a wrinkle, though, and I'm not necessarily predicting this. I think, like Mark said, we just want to see the details. If some of the savings in this, and I'm not talking necessarily in the first 2 years, but the long-term savings are, for lack of a better term, kind of squishy, meaning they're not real, and I'll try to give you an example. That would effectively be borrowing against the pension fund. In the mid-'90s, when then Governor Rowland took office, he needed some money to deliver the tax cuts he had promised to deliver. So what he told the unions is, I want to change how we pay in every year to the pension fund. Instead of a largely level-funded system, which is just like it sounds, the numbers didn't change much every year. We pay about the same amount. So let's go on a dramatically backloaded system, almost like a balloon mortgage, where the initial payments go down, it goes way up at the end when I'm long gone. But in the meantime, everyone just hailed, wow, we just found $250 million in budget cuts. Well, but meanwhile, all the money that would have gone into the pension fund and all the interest it would have earned over the next 15 years is all, water under the bridge. If, and I'm not saying he necessarily has, if Governor Malloy has anything of that nature, if he has arranged to defer any types of payments, that's effectively borrowing against the pension fund. I think that's one of the reasons everyone's curious about his projection of $20 billion or $21 billion saved over 20 years. He didn't say $21 billion in the general fund, which sounds kind of like a little soft detail, but that could be very crucial. You could save a huge amount of money in the pension fund, but what it could translate into the budget would be much smaller because the pension fund is in such bad shape, it needs a lot of money.
Mark, as the legislature resumes its work this week, what kind of atmosphere do they start out with, and can they now look beyond the budget? Can they consider that it's taken care of and move into other issues, or do they still have that union vote hanging over their heads?
They do, and but the budget was really never finished. I mean, there's a whole bunch of implementer bills that are still being worked on, and regardless of whether they got a deal or didn't get a deal, there was some significant details on this budget that they needed to figure out. So this, I think, will allow the legislature to look at some other issues. But the legislators are going to have the same questions that we have here this morning. They're going to want to see the details. They're going to want to figure out how this really works.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Mark Pazniokas and Keith Phaneuf, both from the Connecticut Mirror. You can find their work every day on ctmirror.org. We're glad to have you with us. And now let's look at what's coming up live today on CTN. The Appropriations Committee meets at 10. We'll pick up live coverage after committee members finish up their caucus. You'll be able to see the meeting on the air and on CTN's web stream. And coming up at 1 p.m., you can see the Reapportionment Committee meeting on CTN's web stream. And now a look at what else is going on around the Capitol today. To get a more in-depth review of what's going on at the state capitol, be sure to tune into Capitol Report Week in Review. The program premieres on CTN every Friday at 7, then is rebroadcast throughout the weekend and on Monday mornings right before this show, Capitol Report Morning Update. For exact broadcast times, go to our website and check that out. Well, just to recap what's happening today, now that a concessions agreement has been reached between the Malloy administration and the state employee unions, union leaders are beginning the process of presenting the deal to their rank and file, who must approve the package. And as we were told, it is a fairly lengthy and complicated process because of the number of different bargaining units that are involved. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on what's happening with that. And we thank you for joining us on Capitol Report Morning Update for this Monday morning. You can also become a fan of CTN on Facebook and follow CT Network TV on Twitter. I'm Diane Smith. I'll look for you tomorrow morning right here at 9 o'clock at the Legislative Office Building. Have a great day.